In a world on the brink, the difference between war and peace was one honest man. We are the Spy-Fi guys, and this is Bridge of Spies. Welcome to the Spy-Fi guys, where we cover spy fact, spy fiction, and everything in between. I'm Zach.
And I'm Christian.
And today we're covering Bridge of Spies from 2015, starring Tom Hanks, and directed by Stephen Spielberg, and written by the Coen brothers.
Wait, really? I didn't know that.
Yes. I think Matt Sherman was one of the writers, but the other two were Joel and Ethan Coen.
Nice.
And I feel like their influence definitely stands out in the screenplay.
Yeah. So this is the third part of our sort of Cold War 60s spies, well, early 60s, sort of continuing on this thread now. Actually, although technically, the movie takes place in 1957, but goes through a number of years and ends finally around 1960, if I recall.
Mm-hmm. I remember when this movie came out.
Mm-hmm.
I remember that it looked kind of generic and that Tom Hanks was the big selling point. And never really had any interest in seeing it, but I did always mean to get around to it. So I'm glad we had the opportunity this time.
Yeah, well, actually, I did want to see it. I just never got a chance to in theaters, unfortunately. But I'm happy to watch it now. All right, so let's start with the synopsis from IMDb. During the Cold War, an American lawyer is recruited to defend an arrested Soviet spy in court, and then help the CIA facilitate an exchange of the spy for the Soviet-captured American U-2 pilot, Francis Gary Powers.
Which I hope will be a familiar name to those of us listening to the show. He's sort of an infamous name. Before I started watching and reading this, I knew that he wasn't particularly well regarded, but not too much else about him.
Yeah, I knew that he, got captured and the plane wasn't destroyed, but I didn't know why. And at least as portrayed in this movie, there's seemingly good reasons why. And I guess you can tell us in our Spy Fact for Spy Fiction section whether or not those reasons are true.
Absolutely. So let's just jump right in. As always, this will be a spoiler-filled synopsis and opinions about the movie. And if you want to pause and go watch it yourself, I found it on Amazon Prime, though I did have to pay for it. Maybe it'll be on a streaming service by the time this comes out. So we begin, it's 1957, and the movie is inspired by a true story. We don't need to go through this again.
True events.
Oh, that's even worse. Just when I thought it couldn't get worse. Inspired by true events. We meet Abel, Rudolph Abel.
Played by Mark Rylance.
Am I supposed to know who Mark Rylance is?
He's basically been Spielberg's sort of go-to guy for his for almost the last 5-10 years in terms of, his movies. He was the aforementioned BFG. Well, he's the titular BFG in the movie BFG. And yeah, he's been in a lot of stuff. Okay.
So we meet him. He is painting in his apartment in New York City. He gets a phone call, and the camera pans across all of this electrical sensing equipment of some sort. He goes for a walk, and one of the detectives from The Wire, follows him.
Is it really the guy from The Wire? I didn't know.
Well, he's one of them from The Wire. There are admittedly a lot of cops in The Wire.
Right.
But those of you who have seen it will recognize him. They follow him. They lose him. They find him again.
Yeah, so he gets on the subway, and they lose him in the crowd as he gets off on Broad Street. And what made me kind of laugh, because over at the Spy Museum, they do these Surveillance 101 classes led by Eric O'Neill, who is, if you've listened to our podcast, he is the guy played by Ryan Phillippe in what's that movie?
Breach.
But yeah, so I have not taken it, but one of our friends has taken it, and he made the exact same mistake that the cops did. They lost the target going down into the subway, or into the metro, I think, and then couldn't find him, and then ran into them, and they got burned.
Oh, geez. But so it's all surveillance on foot then. Yeah. That seems like an interesting thing to be teaching just random people to know.
I mean, it's. I mean, it's not like you can. Well, there's probably some sort of legal disclaimer that they give you when you take that. But yeah, so that just made me laugh and think about that, because that literally happened to a friend who took the class.
Maybe it's more common than you'd think.
Mm-hmm.
So then in the next part, we have Fisher, or I'm sorry, I think of him as Fisher because that is his like American cover identity, but it's Abel. So Abel.
Is that from the book?
Yeah.
Because I don't think they ever mentioned that in the movie.
He has like 4 names in the book, but and the most common one is Fisher.
So Abel, yeah.
Yeah, so Abel is painting, and he's painting, and it's a dead drop. He like reaches under the bench.
I like that. So he's painting, and very I was watching him because the camera's panning across his easel and down. I was like, all right, where is it? Where is he hiding something? And he just very subtly reaches underneath the bench, pulls out a nickel.
Yes. And it's not just any nickel, it's a nickel that it contains a piece of paper inside of it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like spy gadgets. First 5 minutes, you got tons of spy stuff in this movie that may not be your conventional spy movie, but we'll get there. So
come on, it's got spies in the title at least.
That's fair. So okay. So he gets arrested. The G-men break into his apartment. He's in his underwear. He doesn't have his false teeth, and they keep calling him Colonel.
Mm-hmm. And the men who were following him, we find out, are from are agents of the FBI.
Mm-hmm. And Abel is totally believable as the guy who has no idea what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Well, they say we need to search room. He said, "Okay, can I clean up my palette though? If I don't put them away properly, all the paints will be ruined." I said, "Sure." Sure. As I have a rag, let me just do it. And as he grabs the rag, he very sneakily grabs the paper with all that was hidden inside the nickel.
And this is ridiculous. It's the worst example of police mishandling evidence from when in Star Wars, when the Empire didn't blast that escape pod out of the sky. When you're raiding a place that has illegal stuff, they always will try to dump the cargo.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what Abel did here. No, you don't get to clean up. You're under arrest. Anything in this apartment could have been evidence.
Mm-hmm.
So he gets taken away, and then we finally meet Tom Hanks as James Donovan.
Yeah, so he's in a bar with and he's talking with another lawyer and arguing about insurance claims, and I didn't think this was actually come back to this was well written because it talks about how something may be happening to two parties or more than one party, but from the other perspective, it's only happening to one party. There's only one incident. It's like, I'm not going to pay attention to this. What does this have to do with anything? But it comes back in the end.
Yeah, there's multiple takeaways from this scene. So first of all, it's very Coen brothers. It even reminded me of them before I knew that they had written it. It also shows that he's a lawyer.
Right.
I guess they could have just told us that he's a lawyer. But then finally, quick tangent. So when I first moved to DC, I didn't know anybody. I went on a ski trip with a bunch of lawyers. You don't know any of them. You've never met any of them. But this is how they would talk. It's like the back and forth crossfire, and they said fair all the time.
Yeah, well, we do know have a few mutual friends who are lawyers, and yeah, they talk like that too.
So it must be a professional trait.
Yeah.
So I was like, this scene is funny. Is this movie supposed to be funny? I don't get it.
I don't know if we mentioned it, but when they're talking about the case, they're talking about insurance claims, which gives us a hint of what kind of lawyer Jim Donovan is, and not what I was expecting when I knew that he was going to be the one handling this case. I'm like, all right, why is he talking about insurance?
Right, and he himself is confused when he's asked by his firm to defend. I almost said Fisher again. To defend Abel.
Abel, yeah.
Yeah. They point out that he served in Nuremberg on the
prosecution side.
I almost forgot the word prosecution. Prosecution.
But he hasn't practiced criminal law in years, is what he says.
Yes.
But their argument for why he has to do it is that it has to look like it was proper. He got a proper defense.
Mm-hmm. And even though they don't seem to actually believe that, though.
No, it kills me. It's all about appearance for them. Really, is that not that he actually has a proper defense, but it has to look like he has a proper defense.
Well, of course, that's sort of the whole thing. The first half of the movie is about is the first half of the movie is not a spy movie. It's like a legal drama. Where it's all about, as we said in the inner world tagline, that Tom Hanks is the one man standing up for what's right. A brief thing is we meet his assistant, Doug.
Yeah, what was the point of that?
Well, it comes back. So Doug is like, he wants Doug to help. Doug says he has a date. James says cancel it, and they get to work.
All right, so completely, apropos of nothing. Was the date? At first, I thought the date was going to be with his daughter, and then because she got stood up, and I thought they were going to like. I didn't know how much of the family was going to be in this, so I was like, all right, are the assistant and the daughter going to like start dating or something?
I think the implication when she says I got stood up was she was on a date with Doug, and then he had to cancel it. So I don't think she was literally stood up, like she was at the date place and he didn't show up. I think she's saying it because she's resentful towards the dad for making Doug work.
Maybe. I feel like they should have made that a little more explicit because like they never have the two actually interacting, if that was the implication.
It may have been an editing thing. Movies
Could have been.
constantly do this. Even movies that we've covered is they have like these sort of half formulated ideas that maybe were intended to bear out better and then just don't follow through with it for one reason or another. Yeah. Right. They're all at dinner. The daughter's there. She's resentful. Doug comes in looking like a character from like a screwball comedy because he has his arms full of books.
Yeah. So, and one of the things we kind of glossed over is the fact that Jim Donovan realizes that if he takes his case, he is going to be reviled by everyone because they're wondering why he's defending a Soviet spy. I feel like anytime we bring up the Cold War, we say that this time period is the height of the Cold War, but I feel like the entire Cold War was the height of the Cold War, really.
Well, certainly there are parts that are colder than others.
True. But at this point, especially when I feel like this is probably, the Rosenbergs were before this already, so it's not the first Soviet spy who was uncovered, but maybe the first in like New York City.
Definitely the biggest.
Yeah.
And wasn't this pretty close to the Soviets testing H-bombs?
Probably. I mean, especially with later on, we have one of Jim's sons, Roger, sees this, the video, and we'll get to it in a bit, about atomic weapons.
And you know what else was going on? And this is not in the movie at all, but it was in the book, was the space race.
That makes sense. 57, so that's prior to the... Yeah, Sputnik was 57? No, year was Sputnik. I should know this.
I don't know the year, but it's around there.
Yeah.
So they have Sputnik, they have dogs going into space, they have...
Laika.
Yeah, they have the Berlin Wall going up as depicted in the movie, so things are...
So a lot of things happening, yeah. At dinner, his wife, Jim's wife, thinks that he's only considering taking the case, not that he's actually taking the case, but Doug, of course, ruins all that.
Yeah, which is Coen brothers. You're not taking it. No, we're not taking it. Oh, we're taking it. Well, like the quick stuff.
Wait, who plays Doug? Because I recognized him, but I could not remember what his name was. Oh, Billy Magnuson. That's why.
Who's he?
Well, he what's he been in? Well, he is in the new Bond film, which hopefully by the time this comes out, will be coming out soon.
Or we'll have already seen it.
No, yeah.
Okay, so they take the case. Then he goes to see Abel in prison. Abel describes the CIA interrogating him, trying to turn him against his country. And
I have a great line here, reading out all the charges against him, and says that he's an unregistered agent of a foreign power. And Abel says, "Do many agents register?"
And then later they have a similar exchange where he says, "You could be facing the death penalty. You don't seem alarmed." And Abel says, "Would that help?" So meanwhile, we meet Francis Gary Powers and his friend, played by Jesse Plemons.
I've recognized him.
He shows up everywhere.
and so they're in a motel room.
Yes.
And Gary Powers is connected to a polygraph. And he's being asked questions of, are you an agent of the Soviet powers? And actually, no, that's the only question I remember. Do you remember any other questions he was asked?
No, I don't remember other questions. But that's certainly he certainly has the biggest reaction to that one. And already we sort of see what the way that the movie is trying to depict him. Depicting historical figures are very tricky. But I get the impression, maybe you disagree, that this movie's depicting him as like a well-meaning but kind of dopey guy.
Maybe a little. I mean, well, yeah, I didn't necessarily see it as dopey, but it's definitely like, yeah, you're all sort of an all-American, but not necessarily a rocket scientist. Someone who will follow, a good soldier who will follow orders. Yeah.
Yeah, but not a good soldier and like a tough Captain
No.
America. Like I can't imagine him like charging a bunker. So okay, so they're back in their hotel room, and he's recruited to be a collector. For those of you who know your spy terms, is someone who goes and gets intelligence, but not like any other spy the world's seen before. As a reconnaissance pilot, he gets told that he can't be shot down or captured.
Right.
And then finally they say, you work for the CIA now, which I do not think was true.
Oh?
So having read the book, I really ought to know this for sure, but I think he remained working for the Air Force the entire time. He just provided information to the CIA.
Interesting. Okay. And so next we get a scene with Jim meeting with the judge and opposing counsel, and Donovan wants to postpone because he needs more time to review the case. Gets denied, and it's because basically everyone's like, why? We just need to give the appearance of a good defense. Yeah. You don't need to actually really defend him that much.
Everyone in the United States, it seems, wants to just send him up the river and forget about him.
Not just forget about him, they want to hang him.
Yeah, well, either way, they want him gone as soon as they possibly can, and don't care too much about how that is accomplished. So then Donovan leaves. He's being followed by a CIA agent. The CIA agent wants to know what Abel has told him. There's a funny line here where Donovan says, "Don't look at me like that, you son of a bitch," or something like that.
Yeah, and there's a good speech about, what makes people American. It talks about his last name, how Donovan's Irish. On both sides, the CIA agent is German, and that really the only thing that makes them both Americans is Constitution.
Yes, and now this is like Munich, where they have a political point and they just keep saying it. He says it at the dinner, or he says it to the partners, he says it to his family. Now he's saying it to this guy, and he will say it to more people before the movie is over. We get it. All right.
Oh, come on. Movie audiences are like children. They need to have that point hammered in.
No, I don't think that's true.
Oh, I believe that's totally true.
So we go back to Powers, and he gets to meet the article, which is what they call the U-2 spy plane.
Yeah, so I think when they're introducing it is the only time they call it the U-2, and after that is like, they even say you can refer to it as the article. So it's got a cruising altitude of 70,000 feet, has three 45,000 millimeter lenses, and an array of other instrumentation.
And it is also flimsy. Because every pound of weight loses like 1,000 meters of, well, maybe not that much. I think it's 1 pound of weight on the plane loses like a foot of
something like that. Yeah.
Of altitude.
Altitude, yeah.
Yes. So he's like, your job is to go and search for missiles. They go back to the judge talking with Donovan. The judge is not very sympathetic to Donovan's point of view about anything, really.
Yeah, but he makes a pretty good claim that there was no warrant to search the hotel room.
Yes, it's like a Law and Order episode. And you're like, if you don't know your history, you're like, oh no, is he going to get out on technicality? Because he's definitely a spy.
Right.
Unless it's like some crazy conspiracy theory. We see him with secret information. We saw the dead drop. Right. So there's no like audience ambiguity where like, oh, maybe the audience doesn't really know what's going on. It's not that's not that kind of movie. I do like how when they go into the courtroom, they say all rise, and then it cuts to the kids standing up to do the pledge.
The Pledge of Allegiance. Yeah.
That was clever. And then the kids learn about nuclear bombs. And here's a chance for me to address a misconception.
Oh.
Which is perfect. This is a great opportunity for me to talk about something that's been bugging me.
Right.
So you know how people talk about the duck and cover drills in the 1950s?
Yeah.
And they're like, oh my God, people in the 1950s were so dumb. Like if a nuclear bomb was dropped on your school, hiding under your desk won't save you. What a bunch of morons telling their kids to hide under the desks as if that'll make a difference. Right?
Yes, go on.
People do say that.
Yeah, I mean, I maybe was about to start making fun of it.
Yes. But the thing is, people in the 1950s were not idiots. They know that if the school was in the blast radius, yes, the school will be destroyed and everyone in it will die. But what about the schools outside of the blast radius? In Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which fortunately are the only examples of nuclear bombs being dropped on cities, the outskirts did have people killed or injured by flying glass, flying debris, all of that stuff, which ducking and covering would help with.
All right.
So they knew what they were doing.
Okay.
In other words, that's the point I'm trying to make here.
All right, and that's believable. That is very fair. I did enjoy that in the video. Be like Roger. He's ducking and covering, and Roger's a turtle who has gone back into his shell.
Yeah, that's nice. I also like how it seems like every movie we watch about nuclear weapons has the same test footage in it.
Yeah.
The one of the house getting blown over. I used to remember where that was from. I think it's from the Soviet Union, actually.
Really? That's fascinating.
Okay, so then having seen that, Roger Donovan goes to the bathroom and starts becoming like a doomsday apocalypse prepper.
Filling up the water. He knows all the details about, all right, first thing will happen is the power will get shut off and water will get shut off, so we need to have a supply of water in the tub. He has a map that he's drawn out of the blast radius if they hit Washington, D.C. or where. Oh, no, it was not Washington, D.C. It was the Empire State Building.
Right.
Yeah.
And his father is like, you don't need to do that. You don't need to worry about that. And the kid says, why not? And he doesn't really have an answer. Because, of course, back then, it was a very real possibility.
Yeah.
I guess he could have said, because you're a kid. That would have seemed like a reasonable answer to me, but whatever.
Jim on, I think it was either the bus or the train. And people all around him are reading the paper, and it's in the paper that he is defending Abel. And so everyone is just looking at him with scorn. So again, it's hammering in that point that everyone hates Abel, and they hate him, Jim, seemingly as much because he's defending him.
It was really very accommodating of the paper to publish a picture of him, the lawyer, as well as the defendant. Yeah. Is this also the part where someone shoots at his house, or is that later?
No, that's after. That's after.
He gets jury looks, and then they find Abel guilty.
Which I found actually, I was so completely surprised. I thought, given the way this movie was going, I thought we were going to go into full-on courtroom drama and actually see all the arguments and everything else. But it jumps straight to the jury's pronouncement saying he's guilty on all counts.
Yeah, which is why you think this movie is going to be a legal drama, and then it's not. I mean, not really. There is legal drama in it, but we're only about the first quarter of the movie or so, and he's already found guilty.
And we get a meeting with Jim and Abel in the jail cell.
They talk a little bit about his background. He says, my wife plays harp in the children's orchestra.
And Abel tells him a story about the standing man, which I meant to write down what it translated to in Russian.
Yeah, I don't have what it translates to, but while you're looking that up, the story is that there was a guy, these border guards were giving him a hard time. Every time they hit him, he would get back up until eventually they just stopped hitting him. They were like, this guy is too much. We can't break him. And of course, the obvious metaphor is that Donovan is like this guy who keeps getting punched.
He's your Captain America. I can do this all day.
Yeah. Though, of course, enduring dirty looks on a train isn't exactly the same thing as getting punched in the face over and over again.
True. Here we go. It's stoit I music, which means standing man. Yeah.
All right.
So later, Jim pays a house visit to the judge and talks to him about sentencing. And Jim is trying to talk him down from the death sentence, says it's in the best interest of the U.S. because what happens when, and it's not if, it's when when a spy gets caught, and we have no one to bargain with.
So he effectively predicts that there's going to be a swap later.
Yeah. So then we go to a sentencing hearing, and Abel's given 30 years. I thought he was going to get a life sentence. Well, I mean, given his age, then may have been a life sentence, but still. Yeah, I feel like there's a difference in, I don't know, when you say that, when you say 30 years versus a life sentence, there's something more impactful about a life sentence.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, especially this is controversial given that the Rosenbergs were just hanged not that long ago for the exact same crime.
Yeah. Well, not the exact same crime because they're not because they were U.S. citizens and they were traitors as opposed to him who's a spy. So it's a there's a difference, I would say.
It's a slight difference.
Yeah.
But okay, that's true. So there's an outburst in the courtroom. Everybody's mad because they wanted to kill him.
There's one guy who's shouting, like, why aren't we hanging him?
Yeah, and
there's a mob of reporters outside who are trying to get anything they can, and Jim says that, we'll have grounds in the appellate court. And his boss is like pissed off, as is his wife, and saying, what are you doing? You're done. You don't need to keep appealing. That's it.
Yeah, it's like, dude, enough already. But I said as an audience member too, it's like, yeah, we get it. Okay, he has to get his fair trial. It would have been nice to have seen the trial to know if it was actually unfair. But whatever. I also liked in the part with the reporters that on the ground there's like all these flash bulbs on the carpet. I don't know how historically accurate that is.
I don't know, but it's good imagery.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So next is we have the shooting at his house. Maybe not quite a drive-by shooting, but there's gunshots at his house. The same daughter from before is at home.
She's watching TV.
Yes. And when the cops show up, there's like a pretty big crowd for this like suburban house. And one of the cops like gets in Donovan's face.
Yeah, and doesn't understand why he's still defending Abel.
Which is very unprofessional behavior by that cop, I must say.
Yeah, and no, it's inexcusable, but it is understandable given the hype and the tension surrounding all of this. But it's completely inexcusable, and the movie portrays it as such. Jim and Abel meeting again in the cell, and he brought over a radio so he could listen to music. And Jim tells him that he wants to bring the case up to the Supreme Court.
Right.
And Abel is telling Jim to be careful, And actually, I think this
might have been before the shooting.
I think it's before, because then that makes it
worse. Yeah. Of course they do, exactly like you said they would.
And then we go back to U2 training with Powers, Gary. Yeah. And so they're talking about how if they need to bail out, there's a self-destruct function, but it's presumed that they will go down with the plane.
Right.
Unless they are close to a border and they know they can get out. And if they do get out, they're supposed to take the silver dollar with them. And inside the silver dollar, there's a pin, which has some poison on it. And if they scratch themselves anywhere, it'll take effect.
And the death will be instantaneous. Or so they say. Okay, so we go back to the Supreme Court.
When I saw this, I'm like, that's definitely not the actual Supreme Court in DC. Because if you look to the right of the screen, there's a tall building, and there are no tall buildings near the Supreme Court, like on the mall.
Nope. But it definitely was the Supreme Court of the United States, not like the Supreme Court of New York. Too many Supreme Courts.
Yeah. It said, on the screen it says Supreme Court of the United States. I'm like, is that supposed to be the one in DC? Yeah.
Yeah, my understanding is that this case did go all the way to the one in DC.
Okay, so it's just a bad filming location.
I think so.
All right.
So then in this part, someone references the Cold War. And I was like, wait a minute. They never refer to things by their names while they're actually happening.
Yeah. Did you look it up?
So, hold on. I'm getting
okay. All right.
So you know how in Pearl Harbor, one of your favorite movies, I think it's Cuba Gooding Jr. who says, I think World War II just started.
No. It was not Cuba Gooding Jr. It was one of the no-name soldiers.
But it was in Pearl Harbor. It was
in that movie. Yeah.
Okay. So that is laughable, obviously.
I enjoy that.
But then I went and looked it up, and what I found was that people were using the term the Cold War from like 1945 up through the 1950s and beyond.
All right.
I mean, maybe not capital TCW.
Yeah.
But they were like
a Cold War.
Yes, between the USSR and the USA. So it actually makes sense and it actually works.
That is funny. All right. I like how when you make these explanations, you like to take a dig at my movie choices.
Well, come on. You like Pearl Harbor. You like set yourself up for it.
I have a soft spot for that because I lived in Hawaii near Pearl Harbor.
Yeah, that's not something you're going to find from a lot of Michael Bay fans, is their reasoning for that. So Powers is in his mission. He's on his plane.
Yeah, we see him actually taking off. So I really should have looked this up before, and this is going to be one of one of these recurring things in this. So
Mhm.
how far? What is the edge of space?
I do not know what the edge of space is, but it sure looks like he's there,
Yeah, because
wherever it.
that's what I'm getting to. Is like it looks like he is just on the edge of space, basically.
Mhm. Hence the need for that big suit.
100 kilometers or 62 miles. Why do we use the? Why don't we use metric? What is 70,000 feet? All right, we're looking this up now because I need to know. It's 13 miles.
Oh.
So not at the edge of space, but still pretty high up.
Yeah. So he's taking pictures using this targeting computer that looks like something out of Star Wars. But then suddenly missiles like come out of nowhere.
Yeah, I was surprised, but I actually did not remember why, like if he got shot down, if there was a mechanical failure, or why he went down. I just remember he went down. So,
Tries to reach the detonator self-destruct button.
yeah, he primes it and is
Yes.
about to pull the switch, and then he gets blown out of his cockpit. And I thought he
Mhm.
was just gonna get swept out right there, but he's still connected by a tether. I think his like oxygen line or something. And
Right.
so he uses that to climb back into. It's a very tense scene. He
As far as
uses,
great,
yeah,
is crazy.
he climbs back in, and he's right about to hit it again, and then his line breaks, and he
Mhm.
falls away from the plane.
Well, yeah, it's like he falls down and then the plane like falls past him. Well, that's
Hmm.
after he pulls the chute, the plane like falls past him. So it
Yeah.
makes sense. But
Hmm.
I thought it was going to be like, and then we're back in the U.S. So we don't find out what happens to him.
Abel hears about first about a downed weathercraft north of Turkey, in the news, and then
Mhm.
also about what the ruling of the Supreme Court is. And it was apparently a 5-4 vote supporting the initial ruling, so they don't get their appeal.
Mhm.
But back at the office, Jim is being shut out of cases. It seemingly people are pissed off at him because he took the case and is still defending him, and so they don't want to let him do any other business.
Yep.
But he gets a letter from East Berlin,
Leipzig. Yeah, Leipzig,
Leipzig. Yeah,
which is
I
in
didn't.
East Germany.
I didn't realize that was in East Germany. Yeah.
I guess so. And it's supposedly from Abel's wife, but they seem to
Hmm.
not believe that that's actually true.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not sure why.
I mean, well, because his wife wasn't in East Germany, I think was the main tip off.
But like, how would they know that?
Well, he would know that. Well, Abel would know that.
Okay, whatever. So then we cut back to Soviet Union. Its powers is in prison and is on trial, and he's
Hmm.
found guilty in this totally over the top courtroom.
Yeah, I mean it's a show. It's a show trial.
And it's a heck of a show.
Hmm.
So when they find him guilty, the whole crowd stands up and starts applauding at the same time.
Hmm.
It's also crazy, but that's all I
Yes,
have to say about that.
I mean it's definitely trying to contrast between the between the previous trial with Abel and what's shown in the Soviet Union, giving this real is I mean audiences nowadays, especially people our age or younger, we don't really have that context for the Cold War, so and the differences between us and Russia or the Soviet Union. So, trying to give us that real context of just what it felt like.
But the thing is, they're both found guilty. So how is
True.
it a contrast? And then also in America, they're like, yeah, let's send them, let's book them, Dano. It seems like both sides wanted their guys to be found guilty. So it's not. I mean, there's a contrast, but it's not a large contrast. It's like the contrasts are just superficial,
Okay. All right.
But I mean, it's not like it's an undeserved criticism of the U.S. system at the time.
Yeah.
Okay, so Donovan meets with Alan Dulles
Mm-hmm.
of the CIA. You may also know Dulles International Airport.
Is it named after him?
Yes, I'm fairly certain. And
I think this one may have a new record for the most things we look up during the show.
there was some earlier episode where we were looking up things like it may have been Fleming.
It was later than that, but anyways, no, it's named after John Foster Dulles, who was the Secretary of State under Eisenhower.
Geez, do you think they're related? How many Dulleses are in there?
I don't know.
Okay, so this Dulles explains that the Soviets would like a prisoner exchange of powers for Abel, and they want Donovan. Well, maybe not the Soviets. Somebody wants Donovan to negotiate the swap.
Mm-hmm. But the only way this works is if the Soviets don't know that Abel hasn't talked. Basically, if they think he's still ready to talk, then they'll take him back. But if they think that he has already talked and given all the information, they don't really want him back. So it's a balancing act.
Right. Of course, we as the audience know that he hasn't talked, and nobody really seems to think that he will talk anytime soon. You just have to convince the Soviets that's the case.
Yeah. And so they start talking about how the deal will get negotiated in East Berlin. And, Jim's a little dicey because it's kind of a complicated situation over there.
Yep, the CIA is predicting the wall is going to go up at any time. It's great writing on history because you can have your characters be really prescient. They just predict stuff and then it happens. Aren't they the greatest? But he agrees to do it. Sorry, go ahead.
He agrees to do it, but he can't tell anyone, not even his wife.
Yes. And he said, what should Abel do? And they said, tell him not to drop dead.
And so we cut to Berlin, and the wall is starting to be built.
Yeah.
And you see people climbing over the wall, and there's this kid on a bike who's going, around the wall watching it go up, and he goes through the wall on a bike. And he's got an American accent, and he wants his girlfriend and her father, who is a professor at the university, to leave with him. And so as they're going, seemingly just him and the girlfriend are going on bikes, and they goes to the wall where he went through, and it's been filled in, and he's trying to distract the guards away from his girlfriend. So he's starting talking to the guards, and he gets taken by the Stasi, and his dissertation, his only copy of his dissertation, gets taken away.
So that's, of course, is in an era before computers, and that was an enormous thesis.
Most theses are.
Yeah, but it must have been at least 200 pages, and he would have had to have typewritten it himself.
They had carbon paper in those days, right?
I mean, it had to have been typed one way or the other, regardless of.
I'm saying if he had typed it with carbon paper, he could have had 2 copies.
Wow, 2. Wow. So I really liked everything with the wall because it really captured tension and desperation.
And just seeing that one big block go down over where he had come through. It's like, this is not good.
Yeah, the part of the people climbing out the windows was really good.
Yeah, so he gets taken away. Taken away, we don't see what happens to him.
Well, yeah, he gets punched in the face and then arrested.
That's right, yeah.
Which is very helpful.
We next go to Jim packing his bag. He lies to his wife about where he's going. He says that, his firm has offices in London. He's going to a fishing trip in Scotland. And his wife doesn't believe him, but, wants him to just tell her something so she doesn't worry. And then we get a nice big title card saying Berlin, which signifies that this is really the spy part of this movie.
That's true, and it doesn't say West Berlin or East Berlin because the U.S.
Berlin.
At the time did not see it that way.
So Jim arrives in Berlin. He meets Mr. Mischner, his escort, who's an attaché from the consulate, and also another guy who this isn't supposed to be the same CIA agent from before, is it?
I don't think so.
Okay, so did we ever learn this guy's name, the main guy?
Yeah, I think it's in the book, but
okay. I just refer to him as agent the whole time. Although technically, if he's CIA, he'd be officer. But yeah, I'm just gonna call him agent.
Stop showing off.
Apparently, the last letter from Mrs. Abel mentioned a lawyer, Mr. Vogel, who was representing her interests. Presumably, everyone's Soviet, but no one knows who is who. And this is when they start mentioning that they might want Jim to accept a different hostage, Frederick Pryor, who was a student from before. And Vogel also represents Pryor. And they've got a meeting set up at the Russian embassy in East Berlin at noon the next day.
Donovan's like, "Oh gosh, what's going on? I'm not ready for this." They also have a couple things where he's talking to Mr. Agent. He says, "Is there any outcome here where I'm not detained or shot?"
Yeah. So they give him. So he has to go over without an escort. And this is where I find out something which I found interesting because, again, I didn't grow up in that era, so I didn't have a context for it. That at least at this point in time, so the East German agenda and the Russian agenda might not be the same thing.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Which is so interesting.
Is that sarcasm or not? Okay.
No, I'm not being sarcastic. It is interesting.
Yeah, because in my mind, it was always, all right, they're basically a puppet for the Russians.
Well, they don't want to think of them. I mean, they are, but they're not going to admit it. Not even to themselves, I don't think.
Yeah, but
That's why it's interesting.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So they bring Jim to his hotel. It's pretty rundown, and Mr. Agent gives him a phone number to memorize, and then so he takes it, puts it in his goes, no, memorize it now, and then after he memorizes it, burns it up.
Yeah, I like that.
And he has to memorize the map too. Agent tells him, all right, don't interact with anyone, don't have a map, don't interact with anyone, because they'll think you're a spy.
So when you watch movies and characters are asked to memorize things, do you ever try to memorize them as well?
Oh yeah. I mean, unfortunately, we weren't shown the thing here, so we couldn't try to memorize it. But yeah, it's the same thing like that. And when characters hold their breath in movies underwater, you'd want to see if you can do it too.
That seems like such a fool's errand, though, because they just cut. So you can have a character stay underwater as long as you want. It's a movie.
Unless it's Tom Cruise.
Why? Oh, because Tom Cruise actually does all of his own stunts.
Exactly.
There's no way he did that stunt in Fallout where was it Fallout where he did the swimming, or was it the other one?
Rogue Nation. And he did. He actually had to hold his breath even longer than the scene required.
Oh my God, that's crazy.
Yeah, no, he's insane and amazing, but this is not a Tom Cruise podcast yet. But so let's go back to the movie.
Okay, so in the movie, we see Pryor, and he's in the Stasi prison, also known as Hohenschachenhausen.
Nice,
I think I said that correctly. And I went there when I went to Berlin. So when we post this, I'll put some pictures up on social media. So Pryor got one of the nicer rooms. What he actually got in real life was nicer than the one that he got in the movie. But even in the movie, it was nicer than some of what he could have got. Because there were cells that didn't have beds where you just had to stand.
Ooh.
And you weren't allowed to lean on the walls. And there was often water. I won't go into details.
I think that's plenty of details.
Yeah, you don't want to be arrested by the Stasi back then.
And so Pryor's girlfriend is asking about him as well and trying to see, asking what's going on with him. How's your German? So I don't think we haven't talked about this yet. A lot of times when they're speaking German or Russian, there are no subtitles. So you have to get it all by context and maybe what few German or Russian words you know. And I appreciated that.
I like it when movies don't treat their audience like they're dumb. Or rather, it's the reverse. I hate it when movies treat the audience like they're dumb. So in cases like this, where you can sort of figure it out from context, I like that way better than subtitles.
Yeah. And I liked it because you're also seeing it through your viewpoint is Donovan, and so he speaks some German, but maybe seemingly, but not a lot. So you can get a little bit, and probably not a lot of Russian. So yeah, I like that.
Yeah. So speaking of Donovan, we have a scene where he cuts the line to get into East Germany.
Yeah, I was surprised that worked.
Me too. Well, this is such a thing that people love to do in movies, where a character is told not to do something and it immediately goes and does it. And it's so frustrating as a viewer, but I think it's to be like, our character's so cool. He doesn't play by the rules. He does what he wants.
Because I don't think that's the case in this one instance. I think it's really because he had a meeting at noon. He didn't realize there'd be a giant line, which maybe he should have thought about. And if Vogel, who he's supposed to be meeting with, doesn't work for the embassy, so he's not sure what the setup is. So he's like, and if he thinks if he's gonna be late for this meeting, that might be it, and then his whole thing is done. Yeah. So there's a reasonable, but still, yeah, he does go right to the front of the line, goes up to the officer, to the people at checkpoint. They check his papers and they let him through, because he says that he has an important meeting at the Soviet embassy.
But this is how Americans get reputations overseas. Okay, it's like demanding special treatment. Well, not demanding is a little bit harsh, but asking for special treatment.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
but he get his comeuppance.
Yeah, immediately when he meets this gang
of Berlin miscreants who we don't. Again, a lot of untranslated German, but they want his coat, and he doesn't want to get into any trouble. Yeah, he gives it to them. And they very nicely give him directions to the Soviet embassy.
Yeah, but I don't understand why he was wandering this back road by himself.
Because he's not a spy and can't memorize things like that. Like
He just has to memorize a phone number. He can
and
memorize
the
that.
map.
Yeah, that's a little bit harder.
Yeah, the phone number, sure. The map, that's harder. Like, yeah, I'll give you an example. Even if I'm playing video games nowadays where we have to get from one checkpoint to another, I keep having to switch back to a map because I don't like, wait, where am I supposed to go?
And just follow the big glowy line. You mean that doesn't exist in real life?
No, sadly.
Okay, so he gives them his coat and he's like shivering on his way to the embassy. And there he meets Abel's wife in quotation marks and daughter in quotation
and cousin Drew's.
Yes, and he says I'm cousin Drew's like 4 times.
And apparently Vogel's not there. The embassy didn't want to host him. They thought it would be inappropriate because he's a German national.
Mm-hmm.
And so instead he meets Shishkin, who's the second secretary of the embassy. Read KGB, not...
Yeah.
Anytime someone gives a very long title of something innocuous of an embassy, they're definitely a spy.
And this is sort of where the movie gets kind of difficult to follow because you're like, okay, who is that and what do they want and who do they work for? And then we still haven't met Vogel yet, so we can't put a name to a face. And it sort of gets a little bit esoteric. But the scene with the family was pretty funny, especially when, what was his name? Shishkin?
Shishkin.
Shishkin tells them like to leave and they just leave.
Yeah. And so Shishkin's going to be facilitating the negotiation, and Jim Donovan tells him, he knows about Pryor and decides he's going to throw Pryor into the DO2. But Shishkin says, he's held by East Germany, not the Soviet Union, so he's out of our hands.
Yeah, nothing I can do about it.
So the Soviets want the U.S. to release Abel now, and then the powers will be released a few months later.
But it doesn't work.
Yeah, he wants 1-to-1 exact same time, which is, that's bad. Otherwise, they have no leverage. Like in 13 Days, it made sense because they still had leverage if they did it. But here, makes no sense.
Yeah. Donovan also says we need to get off this merry-go-round, which is correct. And so they're like, so they put together a tentative plan. And on the way out, we have a very Coen Brothers exchange where Shishkin says, you should really get an overcoat if you're going to be out here. He says, it was stolen from me. And he says, what do you expect? It was from Saks Fifth Avenue. I'm not really sure how a gang of East German kids from the back alleys of East Berlin would know which overcoats are from Saks Fifth Avenue and which ones aren't.
Yes, but how did Shishkin know?
Oh, maybe he assumed that rich Americans would have nice overcoats.
No, I think, it's implied that basically he has his hands in everything. And this is where you're supposed to get the hint. Okay, he's not just the second secretary of the embassy. He's in.
Yeah, I guess you picked up on that where I just sort of missed it. So nice one. Okay, so the USA doesn't recognize the GDR, or the German Democratic Republic, or East Germany. But then there's a meeting with, I think it's Vogel and Donovan. I don't know all the context. I don't really remember the context.
Okay.
Where Vogel is like, you got a letter from Lydia Abel.
Oh, that's what you're talking about. Okay, I wasn't sure where we're going with this.
Yeah.
So Vogel, Jim meets Vogel, and first of all, more important thing is Vogel actually exists. He's not just a made-up person, which is we kind of had the idea he was in the meeting at the embassy.
And Vogel has like bad guy like written all.
Yeah.
He seems like a total representative. Like the face of like communist tyranny.
Yeah, Vogel mixes up which person the names of Abel's wife and his daughter, which definitely tells you, all right, this is all a setup, and also, those people were definitely not his actual wife and daughter.
And the letter,
or cousin Drew's,
right? And the letter that was supposedly from the wife was probably not from the wife.
Vogel wants to do a deal for Pryor, and just like Donovan doesn't represent the U.S., Vogel doesn't represent the GDR. But and this is all subtext, all
right.
Donovan goes back to his hotel room. He gets debriefed with the Americans. The Americans are, they're not happy that he's trying to negotiate for Pryor too.
Yeah, well, there's the whole question of like he represents his country, but he also doesn't, or he represents his government, but he also doesn't. And nobody seems to have a coherent idea of which is correct and which one is not. I do like how he says, spy stuff.
Yeah.
That's very Coen Brothers. And then they make a reference that everybody hates Powers, but they're trying to bring him back anyway.
Yeah. And so next we have a scene of Powers getting interrogated by the Russians. They, bring him out of his room at the middle of the night, or as he's trying to sleep. They show him the dollar, so he didn't use the dollar, or it got taken from him before he could use it. They're trying to convince him to talk. They want to know about the Destructor. They want to know about the technical specs of the U-2.
They want to know how the altitude, how high it flies.
But he gives them nothing.
You also hit him with water at one point. It isn't just harsh language. But he doesn't seem to say anything in the scenes that we see on camera. Meanwhile, Abel is leaving his prison, leaving a painting behind, and
put on a plane. Yeah, or is told he's going to be put on a plane.
Shishkin recommends Glenicki Bridge as the place to do the exchange. The first time the Bridge of Spies is mentioned.
3/4 of the way through the movie.
Right. And then Donovan is like, well, what happens when Abel gets home?
Shishkin is like, well, we'll make deliberations on and evaluate what information he may or may not have given.
In other words, interrogate him.
Yeah, but also before when Shishkin brings up Glenicki Bridge, or however you pronounce it, Donovan asks, why not Checkpoint Charlie? And they said, we're not looking for publicity. The bridge is very quiet, and it happened without anyone knowing, pretty much.
Yes.
So then Donovan meets with Vogel, and Vogel knows about the deal he made with Shishkin, so there's no deal for Pryor. The GDR wants to deal with the U.S. directly. They want a seat at the table. They want to be recognized, really, is what it is.
Yeah, it's all about appearances and like ego. Donovan goes into like lawyer mode again.
Yeah.
In this scene.
And Vogel is saying, I have a very important meeting, and as they're talking, he's like goes out to his car, and then he's trying to get basically Vogel's trying to get him out of his hair, and where's your meeting? He's like, it's in the West. He said, all right, good, and he gets in the car with him, and they're talking about.
They're talking about Berlin. They're talking about big concepts. They're talking about Berlin. Russians won't let them rebuild. They want them to be sad. They want them to stay suffering because of the war.
And as they're going through, Vogel is speeding intentionally, like going, looked like 120, 140 kilometers per hour, and they get pulled over. And as they're crossing the border, as they're trying to cross the border, Vogel goes through, and Donovan has passport problems and is taken into custody.
Yeah, there's a passport problem with the police. He can't communicate with them too well. And then we have Pryor in an exercise cell. So I also saw this at Hohenschausen. How you say it. And yeah, they use them for, like, the movie sort of implies that he like lived in it, but it was actually to give them like outdoor time. So I don't know why you would be there at night. Also, according to the book, prisoners who were in those cells would like throw bits of gravel through the top, the fences at the top, and I guess they were allowed to do that. And all they would communicate is that someone else is there.
Oh, interesting.
I guess that's enough. Yep. Donovan is let out of prison fairly quickly, and while he is on the train into West Berlin, he sees an escape attempt at the Berlin Wall.
Which brought to mind The Spy Who Came In From the Cold.
Oh, yeah.
Me. Yeah.
This was like a really good part because it was like filmed really well. And I always think it's interesting in movies where something really dramatic happens and not filmed in a super dramatic way.
Yeah.
Where it's sort of distant and you can't see what's going on. I say filmed. There were other things about it that were really dramatic. Like the music sounds like the part in The Lion King when Simba sees Mufasa's face in the cloud. You know what music I'm talking about?
I do. I know exactly which music you're talking about. And I don't remember the music from this scene, but I definitely feel it in the sense of it. Yeah.
Yes.
And I did like how seemingly it wasn't a regular occurrence yet, because everyone who was on the train, like, once they see it, everyone's like rushes over to watch it and see it, and then is horrified when they're gunned down. And it's pretty violent actually, because you see like the bursts of blood coming out of the bodies as they're getting gunned down.
Yeah, I mean the movie's rated R, so you can show that. I also think, isn't it earlier in the movie they say they call it the Field of Death?
They call it something, but I do not remember what it was.
Something of
death. Yeah.
Something of death. Absolutely. So he goes and meets.
Death, maybe?
No, I don't think that's right.
It's the something of death.
Yes. So he goes to meet with Mr. Agent. Mr. Agent says he doesn't care about Pryor. Only Powers. He says Donovan, don't screw it up. Quote, don't be a pain in the ass.
And the agent really doesn't see the issue with leaving Pryor. It's like, you got the deal for Powers. That's all we want. What are you doing? Again, it's people telling Donovan, what are you doing? Why are you still doing this?
Because he's just that guy. He just sticks to his principles.
While he was in custody, they got a call on the phone number that Donovan had, saying that Vogel's superior, Mr. Ott, who's the Attorney General of East Germany, wants to meet with him. And, agent forbids him from going, but of course he goes anyways. And
there's indoor bicycling.
Yes.
In whatever building he's in.
Whatever government building that was. I assume wherever the Attorney General works out of, which, if you remember our 13 days, we also don't know where the U.S. Attorney General works. So continue the trend.
And hopefully we'll never have to find out. But I will say that bicycling indoors looks super fun. I wish I could do it. When I was a teenager, I had a job driving a golf cart. And I thought that was great.
That's pretty fun.
It's like using a vehicle you're not supposed to be using in places where you don't normally see one.
Yeah. And so Ott doesn't want to give up Powers. When Donovan mentions Powers, he like shouts so loud he scares the housekeeping staff or whoever was cleaning up from the big like meeting hall he was in.
Yes.
And he like basically doesn't see the value of Powers. He says, he's given whatever he was going to have given, but Pryor, you say he's innocent and he's young and has got his whole life ahead of him, so you should definitely be taking him.
Right.
And then of course he gets a phone call and he's, I'm sorry, I have to take this, and he has Jim wait outside.
Yeah, this was the telephone comedy. It's like he has 4 phones and they keep going off. Like something from an I Love Lucy sketch. I mean, it's not that much. But I thought that's where it was going.
Yeah. And so Donovan's waiting outside, and apparently had to leave for another appointment. So his assistant tells Donovan that he's gone, and Donovan talks with the assistant and gives him a message to give to Ott, and saying, "There's no deal for Abel unless we get Pryor and Powers. If there's no deal, Ott has to tell the Soviets."
Yeah,
and
so it's playing them off against each other.
And Abel has not been cooperating because he thinks he's going home. But if he's told that he's might not be going home, he might start cooperating, and Ott will be held responsible. So yeah, it's a very clever trap he's put them in.
Apparently, these guys don't read the Evil Overlord. You familiar with the Evil Overlord list?
I am, but I do not remember it off the top of my head.
Well, it's fine because it's really long. But one of them is it's such a classic thing that movie heroes do, whereas they play the subordinate's fear of the superior off against them to like get them to do what they want. Like, oh, you wouldn't want Darth Vader to hear that you didn't lead me through this door, so you better do it. And it totally works here. So then we get they walk by a movie theater. I guess this is back in West Berlin. They go back to West Berlin.
Yeah.
And Mr. Agent and Donovan are walking by a movie theater where Spartacus is playing.
I didn't catch that.
Along with some German movies. And then we have my favorite part of the movie is Coen Brothers dialogue where Mr. Agent says, "You fucked it all up." And Donovan says, "I think it's going to be fine." And Mr. Agent says, "Well, what if the Soviets decide, forget it, you can keep Abel and we're keeping our guys and the deal's off?" Tom Hanks says, "Well, then I have fucked it up." "Hi, honey, what's up? It's me. I'm home. How's it going?"
Yes, the fishing is going great. Oh, yes, I do remember that that one place in Regent's Park where I can get the jam.
And then he's talking about his kids, and he's like, "Is she home? Is he home? Is anyone not busy? Have they even noticed that I'm not around?"
I
So this
like
part's
that.
great, but it totally doesn't fit the tone of the rest of the movie,
No.
which is very serious. So I don't know why they have it.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know.
We'll have to ask Steven Spielberg next time we run into him.
Yep.
So they get the call. The communists, the GDR and the USSR, agree to 2-for-1 deal.
Except.
With one little issue.
Yes. So Pryor gets released from Checkpoint Charlie, not at the bridge, because the GDR wants to have the last word, basically.
But then they're worried that maybe they're going to renege on the deal.
We finally get to the bridge, the titular bridge.
In like the last 15 minutes of the movie, maybe even less.
So Donovan is a little panicked. He's like, I think they've got snipers there. And Agent's like, yeah, of course they do. We've got snipers. And so he like looks over and says, oh, yeah, guess we do have them too. Adds a bit of more tension to the scene. And so they're waiting for Abel to arrive, and they're like, he's late. And he's like, no, we're early.
Yeah, they have Jesse Plemons is back to ID Powers.
Yep. So Abel arrives in a car, and they greet each other. And he's like, good to see you, because they haven't really seen each other since
the trial.
Yeah, since the trial. And also, I don't know that Abel knew all that this was all going on. I don't think he did at all. Like, he may have gotten a hint, because the last time we saw him was when he brought the letter.
It's definitely not clear. So Donovan is like, well, what's going to happen to you? Abel says, it depends on whether they embrace me or just show me the back seat.
Yeah. Abel and Powers arrive on opposite sides. We hear nothing. They haven't heard anything yet from Checkpoint Charlie. So Pryor has not arrived yet. And they're waiting for him. They're like on opposite sides of the bridge, but opposite sides of the middle of the bridge. So they're not at the ends, but they're closer to the middle. But they haven't crossed yet. They have the people there to identify each of them, so they take off their hats, and so they can see their faces clearly. And Jesse Plemons identifies, that's definitely Powers.
Donovan is like, they want to see if we'll go without him.
Yeah.
That's why it's taking so long.
Agent wants to have Abel go over already. He's like, he doesn't care about Pryor. Powers is right there. Let's get him. Come on, go across.
Abel, we're really close. We made it this far. We see that in movies, and it's always effective.
And Abel sees. I think this is the first time that Abel finds out that Jim is trying to do another deal for another person as well. And he sees it, and again says, and he's like, yeah. So if we're waiting. You want another guy? We're waiting for him. Okay. And he quotes again, "Story de musique, standing man."
Payoff. Set up and pay off. Okay. Eventually, though, at Checkpoint Charlie, a car comes.
And it's Vogel's car that he'd been pulled over in previously. And so Vogel gets out, and so does Pryor. And the people at Checkpoint Charlie let him know that, yes, all right, he's here, and they've put him through across the border. And I like how Vogel goes up to shake the hand of the guy who's coming, and he just like completely gets left hanging. And they take Pryor away, and so they start to have them cross.
Yes.
But before he crosses, Abel tells Jim that he left a painting for him, and he hopes it'll mean something to him.
So they do the exchange. Abel is put in the back seat. He's not embraced.
But Powers is embraced by Jesse Plemons, and again, it's to show that contrast of the Soviet mindset versus the U.S. mindset.
Yes, but the contrast doesn't last that long. So yes, they hug him, but then when they all go their ways, they get on a plane. The plane is like a kind of crappy plane, and all the CIA guys are giving Powers a cold shoulder. Even though he says, I gave them nothing, it doesn't seem to help.
No. Yeah. And also, Powers thanks Agent. And Agent takes whole credit for setting this whole thing up.
Of course he does.
And Jim's, Donovan's sitting next to Powers, like, doesn't really react to it. But I'm like, wow, if I was the one, I would feel a little incensed about that.
Especially since you sort of established earlier to be like a guy who kind of thrives on attention.
Yeah.
So he gets back home.
Well,
not back home.
Though.
Sorry, not back home. He gets his painting of himself
on the plane. So that was a very nice painting.
Yeah, he did a good job.
Yeah. But then he gets home. Yeah.
Yes.
And his wife is out there greeting him, and he shows her the jam, which I didn't get. She saw a price tag on it, but I didn't know where the price tag. If it was from.
Yeah, she's like, "Oh, this is from the shop on the corner. You're supposed to get marmalade for me one day." He's like, "Oh, sorry, I forgot."
Okay, I didn't catch it was on the shop on the corner. I thought it was a different shop in London, or if it was. I knew it wasn't the shop she was supposed to get it from, but.
Yeah, well, then it's like, oh, geez, is she gonna like see through his web of lies because of marmalade?
And then one of the kids calls the mom and says, "Mom, you gotta come see this." And on the TV, there's a news report about Powers and Abel, and the report reveals that Donovan was involved in securing their release.
Which is like ridiculous. I can't believe they would say that on the news.
Well, I feel like they owe him one after making everyone publicly revile him.
No, I disagree. They didn't make everybody revile him. He volunteered.
Did he though?
It was a little column A, a little column B.
All right.
That's fair enough. Well, and then the part where the newscaster was like, "We would like to thank Donovan. Thank him. You're so great." I don't know whether it's true. I thought it was ridiculous. But he's gone. He's not even watching it with his amazed family.
His wife goes to find him, and he's upstairs passed out in the bed, still wearing his suit.
His picture's in the paper again, but this time for a positive reason. The same woman on the train. Yes.
Starts to reconsider him. He's like, oh, maybe he's not such a bad guy. And he's looking out the window on the train. And he looks at Brooklyn and, how different it looks than East Berlin. And then he sees some kids climbing over a fence and gets flashbacks of, the wall.
Right. And it's like, thank goodness we don't live in East Germany. I feel like that's the big takeaway from the scene.
And with that, the movie ends. And we get some, before the credits, we get some details about what happened to everyone. Apparently, Abel was reunited with his actual wife and daughter. We find out what happened to
Powers. Crashed and was killed in 1975
in a helicopter crash, working for a news channel.
Right, and Pryor went on to become a professor.
Yeah, working at Swarthmore.
And Donovan negotiated the release of almost 10,000 people from Cuba
after the Bay of Pigs.
So it's pretty impressive. And then, of course, what I have about the credits is directed by Stephen Spielberg and written by Coen brothers, among other people.
And that is the end of the movie.
Nice happy ending for just about everybody except for Powers.
Yeah. But yeah, so should we get into our spy fact for spy fiction?
Okay, so my source is Bridge of Spies, a true story of the Cold War by Giles Whittle.
And I'm going to stop you with 1 second because I believe the movie is not actually based on this book.
Really?
Right?
That would explain a lot.
So it was based on another book, which...
I should have read that one then.
Strangers on a Bridge. The Case of Colonel Abel and Francis Gary Powers.
Okay, so it had the same subject matter.
Yes.
Okay, well, that makes sense because the movie is very different from, for example, Donovan is really not a character in the book. It's mostly the backstories of Abel and Powers.
Oh, well, because I feel like we got a lot of Donovan in the movie, so we don't necessarily need to know more about him.
Okay, so here we go. So first of all, Abel, one of his handlers was Victor Abumov, who founded SMERSH.
Wait, SMERSH? Really?
Yes, which, for those of you who are not familiar, translates to Death to Spies, and it was
it was an acronym for Smierć is Death to Spies.
Okay.
It is. Yes. So SMERSH in the original James Bond novel, especially in Casino Royale and I believe Live and Let Die, is the antagonist for James Bond before they got replaced by Spectre as the antagonist.
Oh.
Yeah.
So I thought they were just where he got the idea for
they were actually in in the early novels.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Continue.
So the movie drops a whole subplot with Heihanan, who is another Soviet spy who is a key figure in how they were able to capture Abel.
Oh, okay.
So in May 1957, he'd been in the country for 5 years, and he didn't want to be a spy anymore. He had no idea what he was doing. So he just gave up, basically. And he provided them with all the information they needed to know to capture Abel. And, quote, he was so terrified of testifying during the trial that he did so in disguise, but even the disguise was somehow pathetic. He wore dark glasses and dyed his white hair and grew a mustache.
Oh.
Donovan, the actual person Donovan, described him as the most bumbling, self-defeating, inefficient spy that any country ever sent on any conceivable mission. He was caught because Heihanan just told him where he was, and he didn't escape because he was like, well, if my one cover was blown, then maybe all of them were. Now I'm more likely to get caught if I try to leave the country. So he went to a hotel room, not his apartment. The KGB was going to give him a new passport there, but they just didn't do it, either because they didn't want to or because they weren't able to. And that's where he was arrested.
Oh, okay. Well, I think they did call out that is a hotel room.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It looked like an apartment to me. Okay. So the hollow nickel. So remember the hollow nickel? He lost it.
What?
Yes. And it was found by 14-year-old James Bozart. He found it, opened it, and found like some stuff inside of it. Took it to the FBI, but only Heihanan was able to give them the information they needed to like decode it and figure out what was going on with it. So, okay, you think Heihanan was bad? Here's something the movie left out completely. Abel was not a competent or effective spy.
Oh.
He was the most senior Soviet spy in North America.
Okay.
His mission was to rebuild the spy network, gain access to military installations, warehouses, to figure out how quickly American reinforcements could get to Europe if they were to go to war. He just didn't do it. He just read the papers.
All right.
He got information from the newspapers, but he didn't do any actual spying. Quote, there is no evidence that Fisher recruited any useful agents who have not yet been identified or transmitted any significant intelligence collected by those who have been. Which is why in the movie, when they're like, we gotta kill him.
It just seems out of
right.
Yeah.
Well, you could sort of see why they were lenient. Not that people would really know one way or the other until later.
True.
But it shows how ridiculous kind of the whole thing is. By the way, the book is written with this like kind of sarcastic, cynical tone, where it feels like it's like making fun of all the characters.
Ooh, all right.
So that's interesting. So when Abel was arrested, he was actually naked, not wearing his underwear. They allowed him to put on underwear later.
All right.
And he was arrested under pretension of being an illegal alien spy. So they touch on that a little bit in the movie.
Yeah. This is why that there was basically they didn't have a warrant to search him.
Yes. That's why there was some legalese stuff that didn't work. He did destroy an incriminating piece of paper while pretending to clean it, but it wasn't the one from the nickel. It was something else.
Okay.
Donovan did endure, quote, a torrent of abuse, but his house wasn't shot at. That's
what? Oh, that was made up?
Well, put it this way. You know how it is with these spy factors in fiction. It's not in the book. That doesn't mean it didn't happen, but I feel like if it did happen, they probably would have mentioned
Cover it. I mean, yeah, it's supposed probably just like to, rather than, have all these different things which happened to him, they just condense it into one thing and intensify it. Yeah, it's a thing the movies do.
Okay, so here's something really interesting. It's not in the movie at all.
Okay.
Is the whole Cold War context of Powers' trips. Okay. So Sputnik launches, and everyone's worried about Sputnik being launched, because if you can launch Sputnik, you can launch a nuclear missile. Okay, so they're like, we got to find out how many missiles they have, where they are, how long it takes to get them to go. Eisenhower, in his speech about the military-industrial complex, is very skeptical that an arms race is necessary. But people in the military and the CIA and JFK are all pro-missile gap. We need more missiles.
All right.
So Eisenhower and Khrushchev are looking to do a meeting with like a disarmament agreement. So if Powers had gone and was successful, he would have found out that the grand total of Soviet ICBMs was 4.
4
missiles. Was
at this
4
time?
missiles.
Wow.
Yeah. Whereas the U.S. had like a couple hundred, I think.
Yeah.
So there was no missile gap. No need to be worried. Eisenhower and Khrushchev could have met. Everything would have been great.
It would have changed the entire. Like, would the Cuban Missile Crisis happen as it did?
I don't know.
Wow.
Okay, ready to go even deeper? That's why some people think it was a conspiracy. Yes.
So that someone tipped off about Powers so he could get shot down.
Right.
Wow. That is insane.
I mean, I don't know all the details about the conspiracy theory. It's just it mentioned it and it keeps going for a while.
Mm-hmm. But the fact that if that had happened, if the flight was successful, wow.
Yeah.
That's something you don't hear about. You just hear that he was he was captured, he was exchanged, he didn't destroy the plane, he didn't, It
was really embarrassing for the US and especially for Eisenhower, who prided himself on being like a straight talker. He wasn't big on deception.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so moving on, the families were heavily involved.
All right.
So Francis Gary Powers' wife, Barbara, her trials and tribulations, of which there are many, feature prominently in the book. She was there at his trial in the USSR.
Oh,
she was part of the effort to bring him home, even though their marriage was already falling apart. She reminded me a lot of Tom Cruise's wife in American Made.
All right.
She knows her husband's doing something questionable while flying, doesn't like it, but can't do very much about it. She went her way, she forced her way to Athens because she thought he was working there. And after the trial, she went to see him and they had a conjugal visit in a Soviet prison, which I will spare you the details about. And it was Oliver Powers, his father, who first came up with the idea of swapping people for Powers.
Interesting.
The actual downing. There were other Soviet planes in the area. A Soviet pilot named Mentyukov was flying a plane called an Su-9 within range when they first found him. General Yuri Vovk told him to destroy it. They mentioned it in the movie that the U-2 is not fast.
Right.
But it flies high, so no one will be able to reach it. But an Su-9 can.
Oh.
It can fly high enough and it's fast enough. But the issue is it doesn't have weapons. So Vovk says, your mission is to intercept the target and ram it. That is an order.
Prepare for ramming speed? Wow. Yes. That is intense.
I know. But the thing is, he messed up. He couldn't find it. They were going too fast. He couldn't see the U-2, so he missed it. 3 missiles were supposed to fire, like in the movie, but only 1 did.
Oh.
If all 3 had gone and all 3 had connected, Powers definitely would have been dead.
Yeah. Wow.
As predicted. The Soviets also fired 2 of their own MiGs, downing 1.
Oops.
Yeah. So when Powers was found guilty in the Soviet Union, his father was also there, Powers' father.
Yeah.
And then when his lawyer asked for 15 years instead of the death penalty, Oliver Powers stood up and shouted, "Give me 15 years here. I'd rather get death." And everyone's like, "Shut up, Dad."
Wow.
But Powers ended up getting 10 years, and just like in the movie, everyone stood up in a...
So here's my question. Because in the movie, they say he gets 10 years, 3 of which will be served in prison. So where are the other 7 years served?
I'm glad you asked that.
Okay.
The Soviets who were in the know knows that in prison means in prison, and the rest means in a labor camp.
Oh no.
Yeah, it's probably a lot worse. But I'm glad that you brought up his treatment. Because he was not tortured.
Okay.
In fact, quote, he was treated better than he dared hope. There's a part where he talks about going to watch movies. When he was exchanged at the bridge, he brought a rug with him that he made while in prison.
Wow.
Donovan. A little bit about Donovan. First of all, he wasn't mugged. And his mission is the last 10% of the book. He took the job to do the exchange because he was interested in becoming a New York senator and wanted something high profile.
Interesting.
So a little bit more of a mercenary goal than the movie would imply.
Right.
And Vogel is character assassinated in the movie. Okay? He is not, I did not get the impression from the book that he's a bad guy. He used to work in the West and came over to the East in order to be a lawyer and to help people fight the system.
All right.
And the Pryors enlisted his help to get their son released.
So he was actually representing Pryor.
Yeah, but he served as an intermediary. He wasn't like a piece of the regime the way he's depicted in the movie.
I mean, I think you're maybe a little harsh on that. I think what's his face, Ott, was definitely portrayed as that, but I think Vogel was a little more. Mm-hmm. I mean, he was like Donovan, is how I portray it, like his opposite number.
Yeah, but the movie, he seems like sinister. Oh, also the part with the speeding car, that's not true either.
Oh. Did he get detained?
If he did, it was very, very brief.
Okay.
Like, it didn't even stand out to me while reading it. And okay. Just a few more things. So on the bridge, a Soviet bomber flew over it at one point. Like buzzed it.
Oh, jeez.
When Powers came over, Jesse Plemons' character asked him a couple questions to confirm his identity. Mm-hmm. They asked him, "What's the name of your high school football coach?" Because he played football. He didn't remember. This is kind of a scary idea.
Yeah.
But then they asked him his dog's name, which was Erich von Schönberg or something German, and he did remember that.
All right.
They did the exchange, but then didn't leave until they heard from Pryor. So that's a little bit different.
Okay. And
then on the plane, they were nice to Powers. They said he ate a steak, salad, potato, drank a martini. He was exonerated in the Senate. The reason why he died in that plane crash in 1975 was because he'd been working on that plane. The plane had a known mistake where the gauge would say empty when it wasn't. But then some mechanics fixed it and forgot to tell Powers about it.
Oh no.
So he ran out of fuel and crashed.
Oh jeez.
I know, a really stupid death.
Yeah. Huh. Wow.
Abel, on the other hand, was revered by the Cape. They thought he was great. But he's too high profile to be a spy anymore.
Yeah.
So he gave speeches, he lectured school children on how awesome spy work is, yada yada yada. And then died of lung cancer in 1971.
Okay.
The last is the wreckage of Powers' plane is still on display in the National Museum in Russia.
I've heard that they never returned the wreckage and it was in display, but I didn't know where exactly. Wow.
And then 2 other pilots would survive U-2 crash later on.
All right.
So that is it for Spy Fact versus Fiction. It's now time for favorite quotes.
All right. Do you have yours?
I do. You're doing it for your country. Your country just doesn't know it yet.
All right. My favorite quote is, "We needed to get off this merry-go-round, sir. The next mistake our countries make could be the last one. We need to have the conversation our governments can't."
Yeah, I think that encapsulates the movie pretty well.
Yeah. Also, unless I'm forgetting something, their next mistake, or almost mistake, was the Cuban Missile Crisis. Well, unless you count the Bay of Pigs.
Well, no, I would not count the Bay of Pigs. That doesn't bring the world to the edge of nuclear war.
No. Yeah.
And I have a feeling that line was probably written with the Cuban Missile.
Yeah, probably.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go into our ratings.
Yes, our ratings, as always, is on a scale of 1 to 10 martinis. Francis Gary Powers' martini does not count as one of them. 1 being the worst spy movie you've ever seen. 10 being the greatest, really knocked your socks off. So what did you think of Bridge of Spies?
I'm going to give it a solid 7. I liked it a lot. Yeah, it's, in terms of spy movies, it's only the last half that's really a spy movie. As we mentioned a lot, the first half is really more of a legal procedure, but I did like how at least we started with some spycraft with a dead drop. I really liked just the dead drop, and then him very sneakily, even if it's not true to life. Well, I guess it was. It just details were a little change of him sneakily destroying the piece of paper, and then all the spycraft that they kind of put Donovan through in terms of, all right, he has to memorize stuff, he has to try to get through places, and yeah, so I liked it.
I see. I did not like it as much. So I will give this a 4 out of 10 martini. And here's why. Okay?
All right.
I've been trying to reset the scale where 5 is average. And to me, this movie was pretty average and on the slightly lower side. I didn't understand what kind of movie it was trying to be. Is it like a a legal drama? Is it a comedy? It's not really a spy movie in the conventional sense, though, although spies are there. Is it like a tense negotiation? So movies, I know that movies based on real life, this is hard to do, but it feels like there should be an arc. Like you should feel like you're going somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
With this one, stuff just sort of happened
Hmm.
in the first half. And then in the second half, it's like, okay, you have a clear goal. You're trying to negotiate this exchange, but then it's just the same conversations over and over and over.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I just expected better from Steven Spielberg, Tom Hanks, and the Coen brothers. Tom Hanks carries the movie on his shoulders entirely.
Yeah, I could say that. Like, other than Abel, there's no real, and Abel sort of disappears for the second half of the movie. Well, thank you for joining us. You can find us on social media at the Spy-Fi Guys on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Until next time, I'm Christian.
And I'm Zach.
And we are the Spy-Fi Guys, signing off. Thank you for listening to the Spy-Fi Guys. If you enjoyed our podcast, please be sure to give us a 5-star rating on iTunes. The theme song from this podcast is Mistake the Getaway by Kevin MacLeod from Incompetech.com. Licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0. Films, books, and television shows reviewed by our podcast are the intellectual property of their respective copyright holders, and no infringement is intended.
This is a personal podcast. Any views, statements, or opinions expressed in this podcast are personal and belong solely to the participants. They do not represent those of people, institutions, or organizations that the participants may or may not be associated with in a professional or personal capacity unless explicitly stated. Any views or opinions are not intended to malign any religion, ethnic group, club, organization, company, or individual.
You can find our podcast on social media at The Spy-Fi Guys on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.